Good morning, guys. I'm starting off the video this morning to talk about recycling. I'm out here next to the recycling cans because I want to ask you a question and I want you to think very carefully. Is plastic really recyclable? So we put this stuff into our recycling cans each week because we believe it will be recycled. We believe it will be melted down and turned into new shapes, new packages, new bottles, right? This is something that we've been working on my whole life. We are learning more and more about how expensive plastic recycling actually is. It turns out that less than 10% of the plastics that we use actually get recycled. In fact, it's so expensive to make plastic recycling that it's cheaper to just make new plastic. For a while we were selling our old plastic, our plastic that we intended to be recycled, selling it to China, but that stopped a couple of years ago. Now we're in a situation where some of this plastic is either getting stored and not being recycled, or it's just going into a landfill. There's another problem with the recycling concept. The plastic polymer doesn't actually get broken down into smaller pieces to be used and formed into new things in nature. In nature we look for this concept of conservation of matter, of things of being recycled, broken apart and put back into new forms, new molecules. That doesn't happen with plastic. In fact, plastic, while it might break down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, those pieces are still plastic molecules. They don't break down into other things. Plastic is forever. We can melt it down, form it into new shapes, yes, but there are very few parts of nature that will break down plastic on its own and use the plastic molecules that we've created. In fact, we've been finding that there are microplastics, tiny molecules of plastic that are still plastic that are getting into our water supply. It's in our drinking water that comes out of our faucets. The bottled water that we buy also has microplastics in it. It's getting into our food. You're actually eating bits of plastic. How are atoms recycled? An atom is an element. It's a basic unit of matter. So we have this periodic table of elements, and within that periodic table, each one of these atoms that I might find in nature is going to be one of those elements. If I put two or more atoms together, that forms a molecule. We can have molecules of all kinds of things that have millions of atoms stuck together. Molecules can be very simple and very complex. If we put together a repeating unit of molecule pattern, molecule pattern, molecule pattern, that repeating unit becomes what we call a polymer. A polymer is a repeating unit of molecules. How do we use these atoms and how do they get recycled? We're going to play a little game called Conservation of Matter, and we're going to look at four major players in our recycling world. We're going to talk about oxygen, we're going to look at water, we're going to look at glucose, and we're going to look at carbon dioxide. Oxygen, that's the air that we breathe in. It's part of the air that we breathe in, but it's the part of the air that we need the most. Carbon dioxide, it's the air that we breathe out. We don't need that. Glucose is food. All living things need food, and if you can't make your own food, you can't make your own glucose, then you eat somebody who does make it. And finally, water. Water has lots of different roles, but for this one, we're going to focus on the water that we pee out as waste product. Let's start with oxygen and glucose. You might know that we breathe in oxygen. All animals require oxygen to live. We breathe it in, it mixes with our blood and gets distributed to all the cells in our body. You might know that you need food. You eat food to survive. Plants and animals rely on a sugar called glucose that's in our food. This glucose is either something that the organisms make themselves, but if you're an organism that can't make their own glucose, like humans, then you have to eat somebody who does make it, like plants. Where does it go after that? It could be used in many different chemical reactions in the body, but we're going to focus on something called cellular respiration. This is when it gets combined with sugar, glucose, to release energy from the food that we eat. There are two products of this reaction, water and carbon dioxide. We might pee out the water and exhale the carbon dioxide as a waste product. Notice that the atoms that went into creating the glucose and the oxygen are the same atoms used to create water and carbon dioxide. We call this conservation of matter. Because atoms have to come from somewhere, They just get recycled into different molecules. So now we have water and carbon dioxide in the environment. What happens to them next? Plants love this stuff. They breathe in the carbon dioxide and they drink up the water. They put carbon dioxide, water, and some of the sunlight into making a new molecule of glucose. They have leftover atoms of oxygen, so what do? They release that. For them, it's a waste product. It goes out back into the atmosphere. But that's where we get our oxygen gas. This is a process called photosynthesis, and it's amazing. So here we have two processes that together form a cycle of matter and energy. Oxygen plus glucose makes carbon dioxide and water, releasing energy that bodies can use. That's called cellular respiration. The carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight makes glucose and oxygen, and that's photosynthesis. And then the cycle repeats itself. Check out these links to learn a little bit more about recycling and plastics, and enjoy the rest of your day.